Hello everyone, and welcome to my gouache painting demo for the month of April. I'm glad you're here, and I'm excited to show you this painting that I did. It's a very small painting. I'm actually not sure what the size is. It's something probably about 4 by 6 inches or 4 by 5 inches maybe. I have a lot of new materials for this one. I will share a little bit here about them, and I will also include in the description of this demo on my Patreon a list of these materials. So I'm using a new paper that I found at an art store in Toledo. I think you can buy it online. It's called Khadi. I'm pretty sure that's how you say it. It's Khadi. They're handmade watercolor papers, and this is something like 600 GSM, grams per square meter, I believe. It's a super, super thick, heavy paper, and it is really fun to paint on. I really like it, and I love the deckled edge around the edge of it. It just adds a lot of texture. So I'm using that paper for this demo. I haven't painted on them a whole lot, but I wanted to try it out. With my new gouache, I got a different brand of gouache. It is Schminke or Schminke. I'm not sure how you pronounce it. I've heard it's pronounced both ways. This is a little bit more expensive than Holbein, but it's so creamy. I love it. It's so creamy. So I'm using, on the top of my palette is all Schminke gouache paint, the Horadam, I think is how you pronounce it. And the pink color is actually not that brand, it is Holbein, and that is an opera pink. I wanted to show how I painted flowers and how I use a kind of a synthetic pink color to achieve the saturation of the pink in this floral reference image. Flowers are difficult to get correct with a limited palette because you just can't get that vibrant pink color. Now this is like just super vibrant, and you can see from the reference image that the flowers themselves were very pink. They were neon pink. So I needed this synthetic pink color. And I say synthetic because it's not really a natural color. It's man-made. It doesn't come from the earth or plants or anything like that, but you need these really punchy colors to be able to achieve the saturation that you need for flowers a lot of times. So this is a color that I do not ever put on my palette unless I'm painting something that requires it, such as flowers, or maybe like an umbrella is a very vibrant color that I just cannot achieve with my limited palette. So I highly recommend one of these colors. The opera pink is a great color. Any quinacridone magenta, quinacridone rose, quinacridone red, those are all great colors to choose for the punchy, highly saturated floral colors that you need sometimes in your painting. So I'm using it mixed with my other colors here to try to, achieve a little bit of finesse. This was a little tricky for me. I was trying to maintain a warm, cool relationship in the flowers. The values weren't that great in the light and in the shadow. It's just a little bit of a shift. So I was relying heavily on the warms and the cools to communicate light and shadow in the flowers. And to be honest, I don't feel like I achieved it like I wish I had. You'll see me repaint a few areas several times. I started off painting the flowers with almost straight up opera pink because once I start mixing it, it's muddied. So I wanted to have that pure color first and foremost before I even started, so that I had some pure color before I started mixing. it's so punchy. It was really shocking for me. I was like, whoa, this is crazy bright. And it was a little hard for me to wrap my head around it because I don't paint this saturated very often. And I ended up covering it up a lot, which I'm glad I did. I feel like I could have mixed my colors a little bit better, but here I'm doing my best, and I'm doing this demo for you and trying to show you how I would approach something like this, a subject like this, these bright, very saturated flowers. Now, when you squint your eyes at the reference photo, you can see that the values are very close. There's not a huge value difference between the shadows in the flowers and the lights in the flowers. So that's why I'm relying on warms and cools. Now I kind of got the basic shapes done of the flowers, and now I'm working on the background. I'm taking a break from the flowers. I need my background for a reference to be able to judge my values accurately, judge my color accurately, judge my color temperature accurately. So if you've been watching my videos, you know that I like to cover the entire canvas or the entire paper with, you know, something before I start making any major changes. So I'm just getting the large shapes in, and I'm working on the background here, and I'm adding variety in my greens. You can see some of my greens are warmer, some of my greens are cooler, some of my greens are more muted, some of them are more saturated, and it's just subtle differences. So I'm mixing, you'll see I'm mixing a little bit of a different color. Every time I dip into my green, I'm grabbing a little bit of a different color to change it ever so slightly. I'm trying to create differences in the greens and add some depth and dimension. So I'm just covering the whole background, and I'm thinking of it in one large mass. And I'm working on doing some negative painting around these petals to shape them up a little bit. When I painted the flowers initially, this first step, I wasn't too worried about making sure they were accurate because I knew I was going to do this. I knew I was going to go and paint around them and carve them out a little bit. And this is a great way to loosen up your brushwork by not worrying about the edges too much and doing negative painting over top of it. That creates a lot of movement, and it creates a lot of like breathing room in between your shapes, so it doesn't look pasted on. And it gives you the freedom to have a little bit of fun with your brushwork initially before you start carving into it. And some of your spontaneous brush strokes might surprise you on how much you like them, and then you want to preserve that. So it's a great way to loosen up and to create some more movement in your brushwork. You can see I'm being very careful here with the negative painting. I don't want to dirty the flowers. This green is a complementary color to the color of the flower, so it will really dull it down. And I don't want to get sloppy here and just cover them too much, because once I cover those petals with that green color, I'm not going to be able to get that pure saturation back again. I'll be able to paint over top because it's gouache and it's opaque, but gouache will sink into the layers below it depending on how much water you have in it. I can always paint over top of the green with a very, very thick paint, gouache paint with hardly no water in it, and it will sit on top and it won't sink, but it doesn't look as fresh if I did that with the petals, for instance. So here I'm working on cleaning up the edges a little bit of the petals, and I'm squinting my eyes and I'm looking at the warms and the cools and the different shades. There's so many different shades of pink in here. There's like orangey pinks, there's violet pinks, there's light pinks, there's dark pinks, there's almost reds in here. Very, very saturated reds in there. Flowers are tricky. I did my best to just focus on shapes. I tried not to think about flowers. I tried not to think about where one petal ended and another petal started and where they overlapped, and make sure that I'm showing this petal's on top of that petal. I'm not worried about that at all. I'm just squinting my eyes and I'm looking at shapes. I'm treating this floral, all of these flowers, as one large shape. I'm treating them all as one. So I'm not worried about making sure they are all like standing out from each other or anything like that. Here I'm increasing my shadow value. I'm making it darker. I'm trying to create a sense of light in these flowers. And it was tricky. It was pretty tricky. Even hindsight, now that I've painted it and I'm doing this voiceover and I'm trying to think of like what I would do different, I'm not sure. Flowers are tricky. They're very tricky. And all you got to do is just keep painting them. Keep painting them, keep painting them, keep painting them, and you'll get better and better. And you'll learn more as you do it. So I think hindsight, I might have made my lights on the flowers a little warmer than I did, even warmer than I did, but I'm not sure if that would have fixed it. I felt like I painted enough on it by the time I finished. So here I'm looking at my background and I'm seeing that there's lots of lights, and I'm not worried about making sure that there are specific leaves. There's a couple leaves in here that I'm careful to paint them like I see them, but all the others, they're just shapes. I'm just smacking in lighter leaf shapes. And then here's okay, so I changed the photo. You can see in the light areas, that's the side of a building. It's actually Home Depot. This was in the Home Depot parking lot in Florida. They had these beautiful oleander bushes just full and bloom, and my husband ran in to get something, and I was in the car and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to get pictures of these flowers. So I got out of the car and took pictures of these flowers, and you can see Home Depot. For those of you not in the United States, it's like a home improvement store by home improvement stuff there. I didn't want to paint Home Depot in the background. That's not pretty. So I just pretended that I could see the sky instead of the side of the building. And that's why I'm mixing up this blue. And I'm putting it in those shapes where you can see the building, and I'm making it blue instead to make it look like you're kind of looking up into this big oleander bush up into the sky. And you can see how the paint is sinking. You can see how, since I'm layering and I'm using not a lot of water, but a little bit of water, it's causing it to sink in a little bit. You see things darken as they dry, or lighten as they dry. Lights will, in gouache, the lights will darken and the darks will lighten. So it's really hard to get a super dark. Even these darks I'm putting in, you'll see they're going to lighten as they dry. It's really hard to get super dark and a super light in gouache. It really forces you to pay attention to your midtones. And I'm just squinting at my photo reference and I'm painting shapes, values, and colors, paying attention to just those three things, and color temperatures, and varying the color temperatures. That's what I'm focused on the most. And you can see it's starting to get some depth. It's starting to feel a little bit more 3D. Since this is so zoomed in, and there's such a shallow depth of field in this image, it's hard to get, it was hard for me to get some really good depth. I'm not sure how I would have changed that, to be honest. This is just my best attempt at this photo reference. I don't usually paint photo references like this, so it's kind of something that is not particularly familiar to me. But I was really anxious to paint these beautiful flowers. Here I'm putting in some more darks. You can already see that those other darks have lightened. Trying to create a little bit more depth. The inside of that bush is really dark. It's really dark and it'll make those flowers pop even more. I'm mixing in some reds and some of that raw sienna color, that orangey brown color in here, trying to have a little bit less saturated greens in here. I'm working on this flower bud. I'm assuming it's a bud. Maybe it's a seed pod. I'm not sure. But I liked the shape of it and I liked the color of it, so I went ahead and added it in. This is a difficult reference to not go bonkers on the details on. This is a great way to loosen up and really try to focus on shapes and values and colors. This is a really good reference to work on that. Now I'm starting to shift. I've covered my canvas and I've done all the large shapes and I've done a little bit of details, but now you can see I'm going to start slowing down and really focusing on a lot smaller details. So now I'm looking at the flowers and I'm seeing, okay, there's some areas that need to be darker and there's some areas that need to be lighter. So I'm right now looking at the darks and I'm seeing what I need to darken. And I'm squinting, squinting, squinting. I'm squinting at my reference and I'm squinting at my own painting while I'm painting. I'm trying to replicate that loose feeling, those loose shapes. I'm not worried about what each shape is. I'm worried about just placing it in the right spot and making sure it's the right value. And here I've moved on to some lights, and this light is a little bit too cool. So here I grabbed some yellow, I warmed it up a little bit. I'm adding, now this is very watery, what I'm putting down right now. And because it's watery, it's going to sink more into the painting. So it looks too light, what I just laid down, but I know from experience that that's going to sink into the painting and kind of meld with what is underneath it. So it will be quite a bit darker than what I put down once it's dry. And now I'm warming it up. I warmed it up too much here and I end up covering all of this up. It's too warm. It's too yellow. It's a little bit jarring. It doesn't have that harmony that the reference has. But I left it because I knew it was going to sink in and I wanted to see if it would kind of like create a glaze over top of what I'd laid down before, and it just didn't really work. So here I'm going over it again. I added more pink. I added more of that to not make it so jarring. So you see I cover up all this yellow and it looks better. And again, this is going to darken. All of this light that I put in is going to darken as it dries. Now I'm focusing on the center of the flowers. Now, they are the same value as the shadow. Most of them are, at least. And this looks too light, but it sinks in. I keep saying that. I keep saying it sinks in. It sinks in. It does. You'll see it's starting to darken already. It starts darkening and it starts melding with the value around it. And that just comes from experience. This is the most frustrating thing with gouache, is the value shift as it dries. You actually don't want it to look right when you're painting, because it's always going to change. You have to know from experience where it's going to shift as it dries, because if it looks right when you lay it down, it's not going to be right in 5 minutes once it's dried. You just have to understand how the paint will change based off of what it's painted on top of, and based off of whether it's a lighter color or a darker color, because lighter colors dry darker and darker colors dry lighter. And it's not a huge shift, it's like maybe one step. It can be very frustrating though when you're trying to get a nice punchy light and you keep laying it down and it looks right and then it dries too dark. And you lay it down again and it looks right and then it dries too dark. And then you lay it down again and it looks right and then it dries too dark. And it's like, oh my goodness, I can't get this right. So you have to kind of exaggerate. If you want something really dark, if you want something to look dark, you've got to make it really dark initially. If you want something really light, you have to make it really, really light for it to look right when you're done. I hope this makes sense. This is by far the most frustrating thing with gouache, is the value shifts as it dries. Trying to give you some tips, and the biggest tip I can possibly give you is to just keep painting and just get used to it, because you will get used to the value shifts and you'll start intuitively knowing how how light or dark you need to mix something. So now I'm working on the more finer details of these flowers. I loved the stamens in these flowers. They were just so delicate and pretty. And you can see I'm using my smaller flat brush to do these smaller details. And yes, I know that these values are too light, but I know they're also going to sink in. So they're going to darken and they're going to sink in because there's so many layers of paint underneath them. I'm kind of out of the phase where I can count on it not sinking in. It's always going to sink in unless I take just pure paint right out of the tube and put it on. But I don't really want that, because then the paint sits on top, almost an impasto effect, and I don't want it to look like that, not for this painting. So it's lots of layering. I paint and then I let it dry, and I paint over top of it again and let it dry. I paint over top of it again and let it dry. It's kind of like a give and a take, trying to get used to the shifts and trying to get used to how much the colors are sinking in or how little they're sinking in. So it's a little bit of a dance. You have to kind of roll with the punches a little bit with gouache. But I really love this Schminka gouache. It's wonderful. It's a little pricey, but it's so buttery. I actually got it also to try with plein air painting, because from what I've heard, it re-wets a lot easier than a lot of other brands. So I'm anxious to try that out. And now you see here, I'm mixing up a real thin purpley pink color, and I'm painting into the green foliage in the background. And I'm doing that to create a little bit of vibration. I want it to look like the flowers are moving a little bit. I don't want them to look like a sticker. So, and I felt like it was kind of taking on that look. So I took some real thin pink color and just painted on the edges a little bit to overlap it with the green. And it did the effect that I really liked. And I'm bouncing around. I'm thinking of all the things that I want to change, all the things that I want to adjust. Now the video, it's a very punchy painting. It really is. Probably not quite my style, but I really wanted to try it and experiment with this opera pink color and see if I could accomplish this saturation. But I really was tempted to desaturate these flowers a lot. It was, wow, this is really punchy. But I left it, and in real life, I feel like the video shows it maybe a little bit more punchy than it is in real life. You can see at the beginning and at the end of this demo, the finished painting, a good photograph of it, and it's a little less neon than it looks in the video. But that opera pink color, if you need punchy flowers, that is the color to buy. And now that it's becoming spring and summer here in the United States, there's going to be a lot of flowers to paint. Here I'm working on lots of the small details. I could see that there were some like almost pure reds. So that's what I'm mixing up here. It's pure reds, and I'm squinting my eyes and I'm seeing where I see little spots of just pure red. It's kind of an orangey red. And that's what I'm putting in here with my smaller brush, focusing on the details now and seeing what I'm trying to be careful about what details to include and what details to leave out. I definitely don't want to paint every leaf in the background. I definitely don't want to paint every little shape in all of those delicate petals. Here I'm doing the last minute details of these stamens. You can see I got some really thick white paint, and you'll see it doesn't sink in as much. It does sink in a little bit, but it doesn't as much as when it had more water in it for the first pass a little bit ago. And so I did the stamens in the light with a really bright white, and then I left the part that sunk in as is to represent the stamens in the shadow. I hope that makes sense. I felt like the lights still needed some more punch, so I mixed up a warm, like apricot color to try to punch up these petals in the light. And this was a really fun painting. It was really freeing, and it was very satisfying painting with this amazing pink color. If you're in a painting rut and you're getting bored, I highly recommend painting some very bright pink flowers with opera pink. I felt like the background was a little bit too saturated, the greens, so I mixed up a more olive green by mixing my blue and my yellow and then adding a little bit of red to it. So this desaturates the greens and creates a little bit more of a neutral green. So I mixed that up, and I'm putting that in kind of all over, not covering everything, but putting a lot of it in there because I really wanted to desaturate those greens a little bit. They were a little too punchy. Putting in some little last minute details, sky holes in these leaves and the branches. This is the fun part. Bouncing around, I'm still adding some more of this desaturated green, thinking of shapes I want to add in. I can see these branches in there, and so I added a few of those in. Took a little break and stepped away for a minute, and then I came back and finished it by adding in some last minute details. This is where I really slow down, and I'm really thinking hard about what I want to include and what I don't want to include. Wanted to add some more movement in the leaves and everything, and then I felt like it started to look a little bit too cut, like die cut. So I took some water on my brush and I just brushed over everything to blur it a little bit. And then I'll go back into those sky hole areas and repaint those a little bit more defined, but then those edges have been blurred a little bit, so it's a little less posterized. I'm not interested in painting an illustration. I want it to be a painting, but gouache can sometimes look like an illustration for a magazine or for a children's book type thing, and that's not what I'm going for, even though I love that look very much. So sometimes I'll blur my edges because it's those sharp edges in the gouache painting that can kind of look illustrative sometimes. And here I'm taking a wet brush and I'm just smoothing out some areas. This is just a wet brush, there's no paint on it. I'm smoothing edges. I'm thinking about the that posterized effect that I'm trying to avoid. And I decided to add a little bit more like a blue lavender color to some of the shadows, just to create a little bit more of a temperature shift. And again, you can see really quickly it's sinking in really fast and it's disappearing, but it's adding a little bit more blue in there, a little bit of a different color temperature to these shadows. To be honest, I wasn't really completely satisfied with this painting. I wasn't unhappy with it, but I wasn't happy with it, if that makes sense. And so I'm trying different things to see if I can make it to where I'm satisfied with it. And I thought that maybe the shadows needed worked on a little bit more, and maybe I needed to work on those color temperatures a little bit more. So that's what I'm working on here. I'm repainting a couple areas to change that. And I don't think I ever got to a place where I was like, yes, this is it. I love this painting. I do like it. I don't love it. And I'm just going to be honest, and I don't know why. I don't know why I don't love it. I think maybe it's too punchy. Maybe it's just not my style. Maybe I got the color temperatures wrong. It looks good. I'm not dissatisfied with it, but I thought that we could all learn together the difficulties of painting saturated flowers like this. It's not easy. Here I'm redefining those negative shapes in the sky after I blurred those edges. And this is about where I stop, I think. I'm sitting back, I'm looking, I'm thinking. I actually got up a couple times and stepped away and tried to see it from a distance to see what I needed to change or what I felt like wasn't reading right. But in the end, this is about where I stopped. So this is where I'm taking a lot of time to think and being very careful about what I add, especially when you're dissatisfied with how a painting is going, where you can't figure out, you're happy with most of it, but there's just something that isn't right. It's easy to just start going bonkers and painting all over the place and covering things and doing this and doing that, and you're not really thinking, and you're just rushing around trying to quickly figure out how to make it feel complete. And I definitely don't recommend that. I would recommend stopping, taking your time, stepping away, seeing it from a distance, taking a break and looking at something else for about half an hour, and then coming back and seeing if it comes to you then. Don't just start smacking paint down to see if something works, because that almost never works. Here I'm taking my smaller brush and I'm doing a little bit of negative painting in between these petals to create some of that definition. These are the little details that I love painting. And I'm dabbing it with my finger a little bit because I feel like it's just a little too strong. It will sink in and not be so defined as it dries, but I wanted to make sure it wasn't going to be too bright. Last minute highlights on different parts. And I think this is about where I finished. Adding a little bit more shadow definition to those stems there. Trying to get this little bud or seed pod, whatever it is, finished. Well, this is about it for my demo. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you next month in May for May's Gouache Demo. Message me or comment on this with any questions you might have. I'll see you later. Bye.